Hey everybody. So yeah, my name's Jim Monroe. I'm based in Toronto. And yeah, I've had a bit of a circuitous and exciting kind of journey to the world of video game development. So yeah, I just thought I would sort of, obviously I present it as just like one of many routes. Some of you will have completely different kind of routes if you do sort of head in this direction. I don't mean to put it forward as something that's the only way to do it. But yeah, I actually started my career in my 20s as a novelist. So I had my first novel published by HarperCollins in the late 90s, a book called Flyboy Action Figure Comes with Gas Mask. Pretty silly corporate crime fighting superheroes in love novel. Yeah, I kind of made my living as a novelist for about a decade. And in that period of time, kind of reacquainted myself with video games. I had really had a lot of love for a certain type of video game when I was growing up called, let me see, called interactive fiction. So see if I can share this. Um, yeah, are you seeing my uh, workshop presentation here?
You betcha.
Okay, let's see if I can just slideshow that. Yeah, so way back in 2001, as I said, when I was a teenager, it was the 80s, and the most kind of popular blockbuster video games at the time were all text, which is pretty wild. And maybe one or two of you remember that, but at the time someone's got a lot of uh, microphone noise. There we go. Okay. Yeah, at the time, you would be confronted with like a wall of text, and you basically would type in a command such as "go north," and then it would kind of describe what that you enter a clearing, or there's a dragon in front of you or something like that, and then you could type in commands like attack dragon with sword and get a response from the game. So that was called interactive fiction. There was a big company called Infocom that was making games like Zork and a bunch of other games that were as they say, the multi-million dollar kind of blockbusters of their day. And for me, as a kid growing up in Scarborough, I was fascinated by these games. They were full of puzzles and interesting environments, and I was a big reader, so it combined two of my favorite things, which is reading and video games. So, at the time, I was, thinking about, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if I could make these games? But then the industry kind of changed rather drastically, got into more graphical games and started to resemble the video games that we now recognize. So for a long time, I just got more into writing. And as I say, I was able to kind of make a living for myself as a novelist for about a decade. But in that time, I kind of looped around and kind of reacquainted myself with interactive fiction and text games and such. And I started to get to know people on the internet that were still making these types of games, and they were making them in a completely non-commercial way. So they were making and releasing them for something called the Interactive Fiction Competition. That was that was an annual thing, and I decided to make a game for it. So back in 2001, I made my very first game, which I guess means I've been making games for almost 20 years now, which is pretty crazy. As you can see, it's text. The text in the center is kind of the main thing of the game, and it was about basically escaping your high school and the suburbs as a young punk in the 80s. I went on to make another game called Everybody Dies, which was also a text adventure game. I won't always be talking about text games in case people are like, if it's not particularly of interest to you. But these are the games that I started making primarily because I could make them. I am not very talented at coding, and these games were simple enough that I was able to do them on my own. And that's sort of something that's kind of important in terms of I'm sure a couple of you have had potentially frustrating experiences with trying to make games, coming up against something that has sort of stopped you. It might have been like a certain technical thing or a skill that you didn't necessarily have, and and sort of quit and got frustrated with that. And for me, one of the things I always try to sort of like encourage people to do is if you're interested in making games, make any kind of game that you can make. Don't set the bar too high. In my case, I was very much interested in, as I say, these type of text games, but they were also very achievable for me. So I started making these games and releasing them on my own. And what I found was that I eventually was able to find collaborators. I started to connect with people in the Toronto scene. And actually, I started to also organize little events, little socials and get-togethers and such, which allowed me to get a little bit known in the community as someone who was helping out the community. But also, I just got to know a bunch of game makers, and in that process of getting to know folks and showing them my games, some of them really liked my writing and liked the games. And then the next time I had the opportunity to make a game during a game jam. And a game jam is something where you over the period of sometimes 2 or 3 days, sometimes a week, just make a game with some collaborators for fun. And the idea is that you make the best game you can within 3 days or a week, depending on how long the jam itself is. So in the case of this game, Gilded Youth, I got to collaborate with a gifted illustrator, Matt Hamill, who made a rather popular game after that called Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time, which is an awesome Canadian game I recommend everybody check out. It's a fully graphical game that takes advantage of his amazing art skills. But yeah, we made this game and we started to sort of collaborate a little bit more. And then I got the opportunity to collaborate with another game maker who, again, only knew of me because of my community organizing and the fact that I had made some games. And he liked my writing again and was like, hey, could you help make this game called Unmanned? And it was a political game, mostly graphical with some text, where you got inside the mind of a UAV drone pilot. And this, came out in 2012. The idea of drone pilots and such were very popular at the time and very much part of the zeitgeist. And as a result, we got a ton of awards for it. We got flown down to Los Angeles and got something called Indiecade Grand Jury Award for a festival there. We actually were invited to Sundance, and we attended Sundance as part of their video game and new media section. It was kind of crazy. We got a lot of attention for it. But this was a free game that we were making. Basically, I was making on, in our spare time. But the interesting thing about that particular process was that, I'm just going to stop this for now, was that I got to know a bunch of fellow game makers, and I got to kind of get my name out there and get to know a bunch of people in the community. And so I started to sort of I was at a lunch with a friend who I knew from the community, and he mentioned, hey, I said, yeah, what's your biggest challenge right now? Like, what are you working on at work? And he said, well, we're thinking about, we got a big publishing deal and we're expanding from a team of 10 to a team of 40. And that was a really big kind of change for the company. And I thought to myself, I wonder if they need a writer. And so I got in touch with folks there that I knew. And again, like, I think from the outside, I wanted to sort of like the job I got right now did come through word of mouth. It wasn't something I applied to specifically, but rather, I heard of through basically my social contacts and network. So I do think that is a really important part of, like, getting into any industry, is to participate in the community and get to know folks, because then, they, if you get along with them, they like you, they're comfortable with you, and B, you get to hear about these things in advance. So I heard about this job, I applied to it, and they decided that, it was a good fit for their company, and I've been there now for 3 years. So previously, I'm almost 50. I had, between the novel writing and my own projects that I've been doing, and I actually didn't have a day job for about 25 years. I was just sort of supporting myself through these weird projects and getting funding for them independently. But I did get this really awesome job about, as I say, about 3 years ago. And I do the writing for their video games now, which is a really fun challenge. And yeah, great to kind of like get to work with a really talented team. So the company's called Get Set Games. We haven't released a game yet. In the PC console space, we are known for kind of like mobile games that came out maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So we've been kind of in a period of growth and gestation. But yeah, the stuff we're working on now is going to be released PC, console, and VR. We just got some funding from a bunch of different sources. And yeah, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. So I'd be, yeah, super interested in sort of throwing it open to questions, if anything that I said sort of sparked any curiosity. Also, if there's something you'd like to hear about in general about the games industry. I have been involved with the communities for, as I say, 20 years now, so I probably can help out.
That's awesome, Jim. Maybe I'll start with a question, and if anybody else has questions, you can put them in the chat, or if you use the reactions button at the bottom, there's a raise hand feature. If you raise your hand, then I can call on you as well. So Jim, you said networking is a pretty important piece of maybe the game development world and kind of getting into it and being successful. Are there any other avenues that you would suggest that might be beneficial to kind of get kickstarted in this industry if you aren't already connected?
Well, yeah, I would say, like, what you want to do is kind of look at your own personality and the things that you'd like to do. Like, if the idea of going out to an event makes you want to run away, and there's a lot of folks that are kind of fairly introverted and don't like to socialize. Yeah, like that sort of networking is, might be very challenging for you. There are definitely more and more communities online that sort of usually meet through something called Discord, which is like a platform for, like community building and stuff like that. So those types of online opportunities are around, and definitely, if, say, for instance, you join a Discord server and it sort of has a way for you to share your work. Like, say, for instance, you're an amazing concept artist and you're interested in getting involved. Like, just being able to show your work in that respect is really cool. The other thing to think about is, like, if again, like, if you haven't made a game yourself yet, that is an achievable goal. Even as an independent, like, even as an individual, there are different ways to kind of leverage whatever talents you have. Like, for instance, if you're an artist, then visually, sort of focusing on something that showcases your visual talents using, different sort of tools like Game Maker or Scratch or things like that that allow you to kind of like show off your talents. Getting in like digging into something like Unity or Unreal through the many tutorials and courses online that exist. Kind of exploring in that respect of like how to make your own thing is really useful. Because essentially there are so many people who are interested in getting involved with the games industry, not having done anything, developed your craft essentially independently, puts you behind all the people who have. So yeah, I would really recommend if going out, like, I mean, to me it's really fun to go out to little socials and things like that in Toronto. We do have I mean, obviously over the pandemic was pretty dry, but things are starting up again, and hopefully we'll be moving in that direction over the next year or so. But like, yeah, for me, a big part of it has been just sort of like enjoying having conversations with people about their games and their game design and stuff like that. So just looking at the region you're in, if you're in a city or whatnot, and going in person does make it, yeah, you're more likely to connect with people and stuff like that. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Alex, you had your hand up next, and then we have a few questions in the chat that I can read out and we can go from there. But go ahead, Alex.
I have been working on a project for about 8 years now, and it gets closer and closer to completion.
Mhm.
Where is somewhere where I could start putting it, or some places I could start putting it before it's ready, before it's done, to start getting some feedback before I get into the final stages of actually making the game?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, what do you mind me asking what region you're in, or
Alberta.
you're in Alberta? Okay. Are you near a city or
I'm in Edmonton, yeah.
Edmonton? Yeah. Are you connected with any of the Edmonton communities?
I'm trying to be. I've mostly been doing this internally. It's been a project since I was an early teenager, ever since I started doing summer camps at U of A for game design. It sparked that want to get into the industry. And I also know that at some point I have resources here, like BioWare is based in Edmonton, which is a really good company that I've heard amazing things about.
Yeah.
But as in terms of actually being like a part of the community, not so much really. Like I said, I've been very self-contained.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, that's a common thing. Like folks kind of go into kind of work mode and they kind of find themselves kind of feeling a little isolated when they have a need to share their game with folks. I do know that there are Edmonton, I'm just sort of looking it up now. There are different organizations and such in Edmonton that I feel like there's one. Anyway, let me look it up. And yeah, I like basically the idea of going to an event with your game and basically sort of seeing if you can get folks to try it out is a very common thing in the games world. Like, it's not weird at all, like, to get people to play your game and give you feedback on it, because everybody needs beta testers and players, and generally it's really nice to kind of a nice way to kind of get to know folks and stuff like that. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I would suggest in terms of like start to reach out to Edmonton game communities and go in person to these things. Like, I'm sure that Edmonton has a jam, also has a jam culture as well.
Probably. I would be surprised if we didn't.
Yeah. So yeah, so I would say like yeah, thinking about that, and yeah, just sort of like yeah, starting to make those trips out to the real world and just start chatting with people and see if you get some people willing to give you feedback and such.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Good question, Alex. Our next question is another really great set of questions. What skills are needed to get into developing or programming video games? Do you need specific software background? What languages use like Python? And for those with any learning differences, do you have any tips?
Yeah. So, I mean, so there's definitely different ways to be a game developer when it comes to the technical side of things. There's a big range. Like there are like the straight up coders who just like basically have black screens with like text on them, like that kind of classic coder kind of look. But there's also like very technical people that just use tools like things like Unreal or Unity. And they're kind of like, they're sort of a layer on top of that kind of code, so that people aren't dealing straight up code. They're actually kind of using an interface, a game tool to help them, or a game engine to help them make the games they want to make. Like for instance, there's different sort of like actually completed games in Unreal and Unity that you can open up in that game tool editor and the game engine and just modify. So that might be a way to approach your to see what kind of facility and talent you have for doing like game coding and stuff like that. And yeah, it's something, as I say, that sort of I really kind of hit a wall at some stage and decided that my route was more about finding collaborators who had those sort of talents rather than sort of try to develop those talents myself. Just like much the same way that my art skills are kind of locked at an 8-year-old level of like a skill level, and I accept that, and I appreciate that the talent that people have in the arts, in the visual arts, and I try to, as I say, sort of like come up with other things that contribute to the project rather than try to do it myself. But I do think that there's a lot of value to trying to do it yourself, as long as you can be kind to yourself and not constantly be disappointed or really crushed about like not failing, because the creation of games is just a succession of failures, essentially, until you actually make something work. It is a very challenging kind of field. So you might find that you have a real facility and you kind of like you soak it up right away, and then but you might not. So I would just say, approach these. There's like, as I say, tutorials for these game engines in the indie sphere in particular. Yeah, as I say, Unity and Unreal are kind of the top ones that are most useful if you do go to a point where you feel comfortable enough applying for jobs. Almost always that those are the types of engines that they're looking for experience with. Yeah, and in terms of like, I mean, Python as an example, I think is a really good entry level coding language. Like a lot of the straight up coders, as I say, that are sort of specialists and aren't using engines, they use C++. But that's a lot less approachable than something like Python. Python is definitely something that you can make at least elementary kind of level games to kind of get a sense of like, hey, do I like this? And and the skills you learn with Python will be applicable to other languages. So it's not like, oh geez, I better pick the right one, or otherwise I'll completely waste my time. Like, go into the one that you feel like is approachable, that has like tutorials and modules and things like that you find like engaging and approachable. Don't worry too much about it. I would say, like, if you can, the earlier you can get started on kind of applying it to work on a little project. And even if that little project is to replicate a game you like, and get it to behave in the way that you know it already behaves, that's absolutely fine. Like, don't worry about being original and learning something completely new at the same time. Like, sometimes choosing one or the other is kind of a better route. So as far as those with learning differences, I don't, unfortunately, I don't really have a lot of knowledge in that sphere. So I'll have to leave that to other folks. Sorry.
That's okay. That was great. That's really great advice. Another question, do you have any insight or advice into attempting to enter the industry while also needing accommodations? A vast majority of previous advice can boil down to a sort of hustle culture, which isn't always doable.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying. I do think it has that there are some kind of limits to that. I mean, I don't think that there's anything wrong with getting any kind of day job that works for you, that doesn't exhaust you completely. That you are, we're game development can be just a side project or something that you do in your spare time as a hobby. I think sometimes the idea of yeah, trying to connect with people in your community who are doing game jams is kind of, as I say, like a way to sort of focus your attention to a certain number of days. So for instance, if you have a day job 9 to 5 through the week, and then you can work on this jam game Saturday and Sunday, and that doesn't exhaust you, like I like I think you can compartmentalize it. I don't necessarily recommend, as I say, like I would say my my story largely had to do with like or it's reliant on a certain amount of privilege not like a certain amount of like organizational kind of skills and facilities. Like mostly, for instance, when I would work on art projects and stuff, I would budget very carefully for the amount of time I had, and I lived very cheaply, like under the $20,000-$30,000 threshold for most of my life. So that was like, it's definitely something that is not something that everybody wants to do or is capable of doing with in terms of their mental health. So yeah, yeah, in terms of like working at a day job, and again, like I also think that like a lot of people feel like they really want to get a game job in the industry, and I don't think that it's necessarily the best route for everybody. The game industry in general, especially the bigger companies, can be very demanding. It can be reliant on crunch culture, which is a toxic element of the industry that is often very assumed that you will be willing to work 60-hour weeks for extended periods of time, simply to kind of like participate or to keep your job in the industry. So it's definitely not like that at all studios. My studio doesn't do crunch. We have a very humane culture, but it's definitely very wide ranging. There's a lot of people who are so I would say, like, one of the things that, in terms of mindset, one of the things you could think about is that getting to know people who are making games, and getting to know how you can help them is like often a first step. Like, for instance, you might play someone's game and they might have an amazing game idea, like the design of it and the mechanics of it might be really incredible, but they might not have good art. And maybe you're an artist, or maybe you're a musician, and maybe you can contribute to that game, or you maybe can contribute to their next game, or maybe you know somebody that you can kind of say, hey, check out this game, like would you be willing to kind of like help out on this team? And like, and that's essentially like maybe a producer role, right, where you're helping to, you know, just to make that game better. Like if you see talent in your community, find a way to kind of like participate in it. You know, so I think it certainly started there for me. And you know, like the idea of like the more traditional job, getting a job, and you know, that kind of that like process of sending out resumes and all that kind of stuff is like a whole other skill set that I'm not really familiar with. But I do think that even if all that happens from it is that you get to participate in producing an amazing game that a ton of people play or a bunch of people play, and you enjoy that experience, then that's a worthwhile thing. It doesn't necessarily need to lead towards you landing a job or whatever. It's just sort of like, and it's a way for you to actually apply your passions rather than just want to participate. You can almost tomorrow you could find somebody that you could help out, and you know, that might be a little further along, and you would learn a ton along the way. So yeah.
Thanks, Jim. I think Holly kind of had a note second to that, but I think you kind of answered it, but I'll read it out. Not everyone may be in a position of being able to make a game on their own or finding others to do so with. I'm wondering if there are any tips you'd have for individuals who may be interested in kind of that specific part of the creation process, such as concept art backgrounds that are hard to show or advertise, but are also important part of the creation process.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like, yeah, like the specialized sort of like concept art. It's interesting that you say that that's hard to show, because visually on the internet, I do think that I think it's very visual and very, you can see right away, wow, that's a really interesting background, or that's a super interesting character design or whatever. And I would say like potentially, you know, taking advantage of visual mediums, social media, those types of things, kind of specialize maybe in a certain community or a thing that you're particularly passionate about. A friend of mine is like involved with like, I forget the name of it, but there's like, there's a lot of like anthropomorphic animals involved, and so she does specific art that's like really you know, for that community, and it tends to kind of generate a lot of excitement and interest and followers and that kind of thing. So she's like really yeah, sort of like found that a sort of niche. And I think that you can find a niche just by following your own interests and sort of putting your own stuff out there and see what happens. I don't have any kind of like, I do know that there are various online communities for visual artists and stuff. I'm just not familiar with them myself. My specialty tends to be the writing and showcasing writing. Like for instance, I'm happy to share some tools with writing an interactive narrative if that's of interest to people. But I don't really know specifically about concept art and where you would go to connect with people there.
Awesome. It kind of sounds like the video game development community is basically your best bet of getting in, is just showcasing your work, showing the skills that you already have, all those kinds of things. Can you chat a little bit about, I guess, how to, let's say you do have this specific niche that you want to get into, whatever it is and whatever facet it is. Do you think you could kind of just break into the industry by connecting with people? That would be your best bet? Or how do you highlight those skills that you have on a resume to get into an industry? Like, how do you kind of get actually in the industry and then grow from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, the whole resume black magic is beyond my knowledge, to be honest. I didn't have one for most of my life, so I have been. I do think that that a part of, yeah, I mean, like, obviously there, yeah, and there's like, I would direct people to a really good Discord community called Work with Indies. If you do a search for Work with Indies Discord, you'll probably find it. And they definitely have a lot of resources around sort of resume writing, things like that, that are kind of like, I think very helpful and very down to earth. I don't think there's a perfect formula. I think generally people are using resumes to find out things such as, have other people, have other companies they recognize validated your talents and skills. That's essentially the things that one of the things they're looking for. They want to know that, oh, this company took a chance and they ended up there for a couple of years or whatever. Or they're looking for, like a certain stability of work history and things like that. I do think that for people that are new to it, again, like, as someone who sometimes is involved with the who's sometimes involved with the process of like looking at possible new team members and things like that. There is a kind of you look at things like, what do they like to talk to? Do they seem like they would be collaborative? Do they have like, like if they already know somebody that has worked with you before and they can talk to them. And again, like, you don't necessarily need to be hired by that other person, but if you had, done a jam game with them or whatever, like, I would say that I keep coming back to jam games and actually making games with people as quickly as you can, because essentially you find out yourself, is this a good fit for me? Do I enjoy this? Because people love video games sometimes, but hate actually the dynamics of collaboration. That's absolutely a thing. And it is very hard to get to find a kind of a job, or to find a way to make games without collaborating, unless you are one of the extremely rare multi-talented coder slash artist slash designer types, which do exist, but they're very, very rare. And I mean, once you start collaborating with people, you get a sense of the type of people you like to collaborate with. You get a sense of, you get better at collaborating, because you realize, okay, well, I got really kind of like fixated on that one thing, and it slowed things down. And in the end, it didn't really matter. And you go through that process yourself, and you realize that, oh, okay, next time I'm not going to be so uptight about that particular thing because it wasn't that important or whatever. Like, just lessons like that. And at the end, you kind of figure out, okay, what do I like? And also, again, like, the best way for someone to feel comfortable hiring you is to like, when you do an interview, you get a certain side, you see a certain side of person where they're presenting their exact best self and most collaborative and all the rest of it. But generally, if you can then have a good experience with a person in an interview, but then talk to somebody who's worked with them in the community that you also know, then it's just much more comfortable for the employer to take a chance on you, I guess.
Awesome. That's great, Jim. Thank you.
Sure.
Marnie asks, can you please put into the chat the online courses or tutorials that you spoke about? Also, it appears that Vancouver and Toronto seem to have a lot more resources than Calgary. Do you know more about the resources that might be available out here in the prairies?
There are, yeah, I know that they exist. Let me just see if I can Google. I'm afraid you're on your own with the actual resources or tutorials. You'll find them. You just need to Google Unreal tutorials you need to spend some time kind of doing research on that side. But yeah, Alberta Makes Games is a resource. I'll put it in the thing here.
There's also one that I just put in the chat, the Canadian Game Developer, and it kind of outlines the different game developers that are within Edmonton and Calgary. Looks like Lethbridge as well, Lloydminster. So there's different game communities there that can always do, like if you reach out to them, they might have more information as well, just for our region. But that's great, Jim. I have another question for you. What does the kind of the day in the life look like for you doing this job? Obviously, it's not necessarily a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday kind of gig.
Yeah, I mean, it's at the moment, I mean, it was fairly regular. It was 10 to 6, not 9 to 5, but same difference. And I would go downtown to our studio, which is around Queen and University. And then I would sort of, be at my desk. There would be we have about 15 to 20 team members. And so, people would often, like be just sort of doing kind of work quietly themselves. We're given headphones when we get to the job, basically to say, hey, if you want to kind of tune out a little bit and do your do your work, you put on the headphones, and then people will basically know that you're busy, kind of thing. Often people would Slack you rather than say hello or say, hey, interrupt your time or whatever. So it kind of is a type of job that I find is quite good for introverts, even in the office, because there isn't, like, obviously the meetings are in person, and we would go to another room and kind of like talk through design elements or different parts of the job. There's a fair amount of like idea generation and sort of brainstorming to come up with to solve certain problems that have come up in the process of creating the game. That's really fun as well. But I do find it's like I hadn't really, I didn't really know, I hadn't worked in an office most of my life. So going into the office, I didn't know if I would like it. It turns out I liked it fine. And it was, as I say, there's always the option to put on your headphones and kind of like ignore everybody, which I like. And people are quite respectful of people's privacy and focus. So yeah, and it's nice to be around people. And I mean, after having been so far out of with the pandemic, when we came back to work, we decided to do a hybrid. So I'm in now Wednesdays through Fridays between 10 and 6, and then Mondays and Tuesdays I'm at home working. So I log in for a 10 o'clock stand-up, which is a 10 to 15 minute meeting where we all kind of talk about what we did yesterday and what we were doing today, and if there's any blockers. And blockers are something like I need approval of this particular element before I can continue my work, or so-and-so hasn't has a certain file that's locked, so I can't edit it. So can you unlock that file for me? Things like that. Any other sort of things you're thinking of?
No, that's great.
Okay.
I'm sure that every company will be a little bit different too, but a general idea of how the industry kind of runs. It's very foreign to me, so I'm learning a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just to sort of say as well, like, definitely there are, ever since the pandemic, a lot more remote possibilities. I think the people like remote possibilities are more and more. Again, I'd point you at Work with Indies. They have a job board, and a lot of them are listed. A lot of them are listed whether they're remote or you have to be in the city. But yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff now is remote. I mean, the games industry was often remote, but now it's even more so. So depending, so that can be good, really good for you if you prefer remote. Yeah, so.
That's awesome. What would you say is the most challenging part of your job?
I think, I mean, sometimes there's, sometimes like at the moment, like I am not doing this, but for a while I was doing a producer role, which is essentially a project manager. So in those cases, for instance, there might be like someone's actions, like say someone submitted code that was that caused a bunch of knock-on effects, like it broke other things in the game, and they submitted it without approval. Then I might have to go to that person and say, hey, basically, don't do that again, and that kind of thing. That like, and sometimes they, would find that kind of like micromanagey, or problematic, like they have an issue with that. There's some challenges with communication sometimes. Sometimes people aren't told things directly, that they shouldn't do things, but they do them, and so they do them and they think they're helping, but they're actually kind of like creating more work for other people. So sometimes I have to think pretty hard to think of a thing that's not great about my job. But that was one of the things that I found challenging about that role, is that the people, sometimes you're dealing with different personalities and different personality types and things that are, and so that can be hard. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And working, as you've already kind of explained to us, you often are collaborating with people. And so if you maybe don't love connecting with people, that could make finding a role in this industry kind of difficult, as you do often have to work with people, and that in itself can be challenging. Alex had a question in the chat. Have you ever heard of the infamous Team Fortress 2 Coconut?
I'm sorry, I have not. No.
Do you care to enlighten us, Alex? I would love to know, because I feel like I just read a bunch of words, but they don't actually mean anything.
So there's an interesting story about this. Basically, the development team for Team Fortress 2, when they were doing a patch update for the game, they found a JPEG of a coconut in the game files, just a very basic JPEG of a coconut on a plain background. The patch notes showed this image and stated, I don't know what this is. I don't know who put it here, but when I removed it, nothing else worked. For some reason, the entirety of the Team Fortress 2 coding platform, the entire game, fell apart when they removed a single JPEG of a coconut that nobody knows who put it there.
I feel like that's something that would happen to me very much. That's awesome, Alex. Jim, you kind of told us a little bit about the most challenging part of what you found in your job. What would you say is the best part?
Oh, I mean, just to get to, to work with really awesome, like passionate people. Like I feel really lucky in particular at my job. My studio is very positive and culture is very healthy, and it means that, that the stuff we make is sort of like more than the sum of its parts. It's really fun to get to kind of like contribute to something that gives people a lot of joy and surprise and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would say that's it.
Yeah, for sure. And it at least appears that the gaming industry is very like tight knit. Like it's very much a community, which you might not find in other roles if you were looking outside of this industry. So that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, it definitely is why wanted to be more involved, like in the publishing industry, and I was involved with making little movies as well, and so I kind of got a sense of like the film industry a little bit, and I really preferred the game industry because people are such talented and kind of open-minded, interesting people. So that was my biggest kind of incentive to kind of invest more time in this community. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mhm.
Would you say it would be quite difficult to get accommodations within this industry? So let's say somebody has to take medication, so they can't be at a job starting at 9 a.m., something along those lines. Would you say that the community itself is quite flexible in those kinds of accommodations, or would it be kind of difficult to, I don't know, be really successful in this industry if you did have a lot of barriers you experience?
I think that it really does depend on the studio. Yeah, not to kind of like overemphasize it, but there has definitely been a lot of toxic behavior in large companies that have, has really been dismaying, about like, basically there is a type of company that the culture is, well, people are passionate about this, so we can work them to the bone. And if they burn out, well, there's another 100 people at the gate that we can pull in. So, there is definitely a kind of gross kind of like disposableness of certain companies that you have to be aware of. Um, so, I mean, that being said, there's also some of the most progressive studios implementing the most progressive kind of like policies, and there is definitely like a lot of them are doing that just purely for political and social justice kind of reasons, which is amazing. And some of them are doing it because the roles are in really high demand. If you are a technical artist, as an example, you can pretty much have your pick of like any city in North America or probably the world that you'd like to live in, and they will sometimes, fly you in and get you like for the interview to just to find out, what kind of uh, what kind of fit you are for the company and all that kind of thing. And like, I mean, there's a lot of desire to kind of like to court that type of talent, of the positions that are very in demand, but as well like like there is an understanding of like yeah, differing kind of like uh accessibility kind of accommodations, with many of the studios. They're very interested in the same way that they're interested in a variety of like ethnicities and backgrounds and genders and sexual orientations and gender orientations and things like that. There is a lot of, there are a lot of studios that are actively looking for that, because we are at heart a cultural industry, and like the culture, the more kind of different perspectives and different types of people that we get involved with making these things, the richer they will be. So I mean, not everybody shares that perspective, um, but I do, and I think a lot of studios do. Again, like I don't want to emphasize the toxic nature of it, of a lot of the giant companies, without sort of also kind of emphasizing that, there are a ton of people who are actively engaged in trying to make the world a better place, as well. So through their actions, and people with like studios with 4-day work weeks, or flexible kind of remote kind of things that like kind of accommodate a variety of personality types and accessibility kind of issues and stuff like that. So
That's awesome. That's, that's great to hear, because if you find yourself in a company that is that crunch culture, go, 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 you need to work 60 hours or you'll never be successful kind of a company, at least knowing that that isn't the only thing that exists, seeking out something else maybe in, of high interest for somebody as well.
Absolutely. And I do think, again, to go back to the community sort of side of things, if people can find some sort of community like that, they can have those conversations with people. You can find out by asking people, what's this company like? What's that company like? Do you know anybody who works there? Can I chat with them? Having information sort of interviews or whatever, or chats with folks is often very possible. So it's just a matter of kind of starting to connect with folks in a way that makes sense for you and what you're interested in.
Love it. We only have 2 minutes left, so I just wanted to ask if anybody else has any other questions. We can ask them now. And if you end up having a question later this afternoon, I'm just going to put my email in the chat right now, and you can feel free to email me, and I will make sure to get it to Jim and relay the answer whenever I get that. And then I guess if we don't have any other questions, I have one more, as I forget it now, but what is one piece of advice that you can give to someone seeking a job in this industry? What would be your golden ticket?
Start to meet other people who share your passions, your specific passion around the specific games you like, and and try to make a game yourself. That would be what I would say.
I love it.
I wanted to throw in this this tool that I've created for making text games. It's called Texture Writer, and it allows you to make little text games in the browser. So if people do have a writing talent, it's an easy way to sort of make your first game. Just thought I'd throw that in there as well.
Thanks, Jim. That's awesome.
Sure.
I'll take all of the resources that are in the chat right now and put them all together for everybody that's here. And then I'll be able to send that out in an email a little bit later on, if not today, hopefully tomorrow. And if I come across any other really great resources, I will for sure also do that. So thank you so much, Jim.
Sure,
this is
no
really
problem.
helpful. And thank you everybody for participating as well.
Yeah, thanks for all the great questions.
People coming out. Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Okay.
I hope everybody has a great day and a great long weekend.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.